Church, all hearts clear?
Is that really what they say?
Yeah, oh yeah. At the end of the day, I'll take you to Black Church.
I've been to a Haitian church.
No,
That's different?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay, we'll try it again. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good. Okay, we are going to be discussing market-based compensation for the sake of the people that are watching and will be watching in the future. This is not a voting meeting. This is informational. We will be getting information. This gives us an opportunity to listen, to learn, to ask questions, to know what we will do going forward. Okay? And I just told them, I said, you have to go to a black church, but to be able to say all hearts clear, we'll tell you what that means later. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start. And I believe Ms. Pruitt is going to lead, or Superintendent?
Yeah, I'll just start out. We've got Dr. Pruitt here and her compensation team to present the really not just about executive pay, but also about how the market rate is calculated. This is a really good timing here because we're getting ready to get into our executive session. So this also provides, I think, really good background information that will be helpful for you in making those decisions. So having said that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Pruitt and make your introductions and then get started.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I have with
Excuse me 1 second. I forgot to mention, everyone, please turn your phones off. Just a reminder.
So with me this morning is Will Rothenberg, who is the Director of Compensation and Labor Relations, and Mike Gaywood, who's a coordinator for Compensation and Labor Relations. This really 1.5 is what makes up the compensation team. And so I want to provide, I know that I have kind of re-provided the information that was given to you previously, but I do want to provide sort of an overview and kind of give you context before I turn it over to Mr. Gatewood, who's going to talk specifically about ERI and how we arrive at market rate and how the basis for that work. I want to set the stage when Dr. Atkins became the superintendent and we came forward with Vision 2020. One of the things that was critical to the success of that plan was to have world-class compensation. And so that is sort of when the work began, was after Vision 2020 was established, we began to look at this thing called market rate and looking at getting our employees at a competitive wage. So the first step in that process was with teachers, and we looked at what is the market rate, if you will, or the rate of pay of teachers in the state of Florida, and began to move towards increasing what the market rate was for teachers. And part of the way we adjusted that in the first few years, in an executive session, you'll see some actual graphs that will demonstrate this to you. But we looked at those areas where there was the biggest gap between the market rate and what our teachers were making. And that was a result of those years when we weren't able to provide raises, when there was a downturn in the economy. And so there was some real pockets of inequity across our salary schedule. And so that was where we first began to do the work. The next phase in that work was the support staff and looking at those positions, not only amongst other school districts, but among competition within our own county. Because as you know, if someone is working on AC, if the community is booming, then we have to look at the competition for private sector as well as the public sector. Then the next phase of that was looking at administrative pay, which includes the executive pay, and moving towards the market rate for that group as well. So that's kind of the overview that we're kind of in. This is in year 4 of a 5-year plan to move towards market rate. And so now I'm going to ask Mr. Gatewood to kind of give you, did you have a question?
Yes, when you say year 4, are you talking about fiscal year 17-18 or 18-19?
18-19 is year 4
okay.
of the plan, yes.
Okay.
So Mike, if you want to provide the background for ERI.
So ERI is the Economic Research Institute. It's a vendor that we use that supplies salary data information for us. It has a lot of probably 12,000 different jobs in the system that we can pull up that are similar to positions that we have, especially a lot of our support positions, maintenance kind of things, food service, custodial jobs, directors here within the district, positions that you would see in outside companies, not necessarily school systems. Most of those are listed in there almost identical to the titles that we have. You can sort the information based on geographic regions. You can sort it by industries. You can sort it by size of the industries. For instance, you can go with like the executive part. You can have a $1 billion company, a $1.5 billion company. So you can kind of adjust the demographics of what you're pulling the data from. What's really nice about it is you can go on there and you can pull a position like, say, a technology specialist. You can pull up instantly and get, market rate comparisons for the entire country. You can get them for the state of Florida. You can get them just for Lee County. What that allows us to do is when we're looking, we can save a lot of time because I'm full-time compensation. Will is kind of, like she said, 1.5. He's part compensation, part labor relations. So there's not a lot of me and him to go around. So when we pull the information from ERI, we can almost instantly get something that's so reliable. And the other thing is it's not biased on, I like Will, so I want to make a director of labor relations higher pay or, things like that. We're pulling the same demographics for everyone, so we're kind of comparable. We also don't have to call and do surveys with, all the different companies. School systems are a little different than the outside industries because the outside industries, a lot of times, they don't want to share their financial information and salaries and things like that, whereas it's public information on the school system side. So we work with a lot of school districts. In December, Will and I actually even went up to Orlando to meet with Orange County, Hillsborough County, Seminole, and a few others were there, Palm Beach, and we discussed just compensation for the day, and it was really enlightening to see they're having a lot of the same problems and issues that we're having, and the way we're trying to solve them. I think we're a couple steps ahead of where some of the other school districts are. But for ERI, one time we've used it, before we had it, 3 of us spent like almost an entire week doing some salaries for the specific positions. Whereas once we got ERI, I could use maybe 3 hours and I can have 30 different positions and have reliable information that we can, correlate to. We also look at outside information that we can find online and things like that, and it's pretty reliable with ERI. People that we know that are in different industries, we ask them, like, what kind of, are you paying for this, are you paying for that, and we tell them what we're paying, and they're like, that's a really, competitive salary.
You want to talk a little bit about the teacher average and how we've done that work for the
The,
market rate?
the teacher average is a little bit different because ERI concentrates a lot on positions that are regularly out there in the general population, whereas teaching positions are normally just in school systems. So the DOE, every time we do like our like Survey 3 in February, where we report information to the state, they compile the information for everyone's salary, and then sometime March, April, May, June, they'll release a spreadsheet out on their website that has the average salary for all the teachers in Florida, the average salary for principals, the average salary for a range of positions, but it doesn't list all the positions, and it doesn't really give you the same detail that we get on ERI. But we use that information for like the average salary for teachers, and what I did was there was about 200,000 teaching positions, so I took the average for each district and inputted that number weighted. So if we have 5,500 teachers in Lee County, I would enter our average salary 5,000 times on the spreadsheet. So then that way I could get a percentile ranking for all the average salaries across the state of Florida for teaching positions, and we could get a look at where do we really rank, across the entire state, instead of an average of a small school district that may only have 30 teachers. Their average doesn't carry as much weight as a Miami-Dade County with probably 20,000 teachers.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so ERI is like the process you use to find out kind of across the board salary comparisons. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, that's the software that we use, and then we put our requirements and what we want the demographics to be that we're pulling the data from, and then we select the position.
Okay, you mentioned that you had talked with several other districts, and they're having the same issues. How many of the other districts are using ERI as well?
None of them mentioned that they were using the same software that we're using. Most of them are doing, sometimes we'll get emails, can you tell us what the average salary is for a custodian, a bus driver, and things like that in your district? And then they'll compile it from the districts that respond. Sometimes that may take 2 or 3 weeks to get, everyone enough responses to have a comparable, estimate of what the salary is. Where we're using ERI and we can get a pretty reliable estimate instantly.
Okay, I guess I'm trying to figure if it works so well for us, why many other districts are not using it if they're having the same issues.
I think one of the things is, I think the mindset for a lot of school districts is they want to compare themselves to other school districts, where, we're looking around and we're seeing that we're losing, bus drivers to other, companies locally. We're not losing bus drivers to go drive in Orange County. We're losing bus drivers, for, hauling rock or PepsiCo and things like that. So we want to compare our salaries to what the local economy is and make sure we're competitive locally. If we're competitive locally, we should be able to retain a lot of our support staff and things like that.
Okay, and I get that part. I see that with the local, comparing the local salaries, but the comparison to other districts, is that something that ERI can do, or do we still then have to go out and, I guess it's like apples and oranges to me. I'm trying to figure out how are we comparing our local market for one set of salaries, and then we have to go and find out with the districts, other districts.
It does because of the competition. So our competition for custodians, and that is a local competition. Our competition for teachers, however, is a statewide competition, so that's why we look at the average salary based on the state comparisons, and administrators kind of the same thing. ERI does allow us to look at other, it's like public government, which would be considered our competition relative to public sector positions and jobs.
And does your information also include DOE? How does that filter into the ERA process? Because you can go on there and see a comparison as to how much this one is making and that one's
Yes,
making.
ma'am. They pull their, they send out salary surveys to companies to compile their data, as well as they get information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We, every quarter, I have to report, average salaries for a select group of positions to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I work with a gentleman from Sarasota from there about our data. And ERI actually uses data that they have also to build into their system. The problem with using like ERI for the local teacher average is we would only be looking basically at our average.
No,
So that's
get
why
that
we've
part.
kind of
I'm just
spread
trying to
out.
see how all the pieces fit together with the market rate, ERI, the DOE, labor and statistics. Everybody's compiling the same thing. How does it all fit together, and do we all need to be doing different things at the same time?
We try to use what's best for us. For outside positions, non-instructional positions, non-school-based administrative positions, probably ERI would be best. For positions that are very limited and few around in our area, we're better to look at like the DOE and compile what is the state average for all teachers, or what is the state average for all principals and things like that, so that we're looking back and forth. And we're also looking at multiple sources, so we're not just looking at one key source for our information.
Okay. And I'm sorry, anyone else? Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so then for ERI, for the executive salaries especially, you're looking across various industries, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you use ERI for, let's say, bus driver
Yes, ma'am.
salaries? So where did we fall in terms of bus drivers and the averages? Because we're down, 100 bus drivers, and I would think that probably a lot of them are going to other driving, like mass transit in Lee County or some other related industries around us.
We did look at that in ERI. The bus drivers was below what we identified as the market rate. Part of our negotiations with SPALC that we have a tentative agreement We're looking to raise the minimum wage to $16 an hour, was part of our tentative agreement for bus operators as the first step to get them and kind of limit the number of employees that we're losing, as well as hopefully that'll increase the applicant pool by having a more competitive salary. That was something Mr. Cody, I talked to him several times before he had left, and he was throwing numbers at me, and I was, that's pretty close to what we're looking at from the research we've been able to compile. It was competitive, and a lot of people on the Spalk side of negotiations I thought they were impressed with the $16 an hour as a new starting rate for bus drivers.
Okay, so isn't that locked in? I thought we had reached agreement with Spalk.
We did, it's a tentative agreement. It's
O-
tentative
Okay, so
because-
the tentative is 16 for the bus drivers, and just out of curiosity, where does that fall if we were to put bus drivers on that bar graph?
Market rate, she's asking, like, where is it?
Where,
30th,
like you
40th,
have
50th?
teachers,
Yeah.
55%, where would that
I would
put
say that would put
in
them
this contract?
close to about the 40th percentile.
40th
to get
percentile.
Their average salary is going to be higher because we have drivers making more than that. We
Well,
went
but that's true with,
with
executives
yes,
too.
ma'am. We went with the 16 with the funding that we had. It was kind of a compromise we couldn't move to like the 50th percentile, like you're saying. We had to start somewhere and make that first step.
okay, well, the thing that's running through my mind right now, if we are basing one of our rationales on executives, and that rationale is we can't attract a good pool of applicants, and we're losing applicants to other industries and other school districts, isn't the same true for bus drivers? And the fact is, if we don't have bus drivers, and we're already running into that, we have bus drivers having to double up on routes, we have late buses, we have, several months ago when I was still campaigning, it seemed to me, and I'm pretty sure it's the same right in here, that buses are one of the huge, that seems to be one of the major issues of the parents, the buses, and on-time buses and that sort of thing. So I'm just thinking of the rationale that we have for executives, and I'm not saying one group's, well, in a way I am. In one respect, if we don't have the bus drivers, we're not getting the kiddos to school.
Well, and that's why we negotiated, and that was, because I think the difference with the administrator pay versus the bus drivers is one's negotiated through a union and collective
Right,
bargaining
exactly.
process. What I will say is of the 800 drivers, I want to say that's over 400 of them. It's a pretty substantial pay increase. Because there's such a disparity between the drivers that have been with us for a while and the new. In addition to that, over the summer, we rolled out a comprehensive recruitment plan for bus drivers and have been working with transportation through that process, because they do their own hiring, but recruitment has been active in working with them in that process, and it's ongoing what's happening.
Yeah, this has always been a significant issue for this district, so we've worked real hard on it over the years. One of the things that's coming before the board today is actually approval of physicals. We used to, way back in the day, they had to pay for physicals, so we're doing that to try to remove those obstacles to employment. We've offered incentives in the past to get them, and then of course the recruitment efforts go on. It is particularly when you have an economy with this low unemployment, it's very difficult, and when you have the construction industry on the increase, that's where we really have our most significant issues when it relates to bus operators.
A couple other factors I think that are important for transportation specifically, and these are things that we've talked about now for the past couple years in transportation labor management meetings, are, like Dr. Pruitt described, there's some salary compression issues, and so we've had high turnover, and we have a gap in years of experience between drivers with about 6-7 years and more than 15 years, And so your more senior drivers end up picking up those extra runs that you talked about when people call out, on a Friday afternoon, for a middle school run because they'd rather be at home. And so those more senior drivers are asked to pick up those routes. Moving the market rate gives you a more of a pool so that you're not relying on 100 or so people to do all of that additional work. You'll have an additional 400 people or so that, will feel like they're valued, there's some future in the work that they're doing. And also, in terms of the limits of comparing ourselves to other school districts, if you look just at bus driver pay compared to other districts, we actually pay well. But one of the things that we talked about with Orange County and others is they're losing drivers to Mears, they're losing drivers to Amazon, they're losing drivers to Disney. And those are kind of their local competitors, but for someone with the CDL, there's a lot of different opportunities. And so there's ways that, we have to look beyond that so that we're not just training people to earn a CDL to go to drive for Budweiser where everyone smiles and waves when you, pull up versus, you're the good driver that's driving a second, third route and dropping kids off, at 6 p.m. and the parents are wondering where they've been for the past hour. So.
So it's going to 16. What is the base now?
1429.
So, okay, 1429?
Yes, ma'am. That's the minimum starting now for a bus operator is 1429, and it's going to 16.
Okay, and then when the $16 an hour, when does that is effective? When do they start seeing that?
The tentative agreement, that will go into effect July 1, 2019, so that'd be for the next school
So
year.
when will they actually see the money?
Next year.
So not until
So
school starts?
Yes, ma'am.
So that's in August. And will they get,
2019.
so will they see retro, retro balance, or will it just be as of when they start working? So they don't, there's no retro, there's no, like,
Start of the
like
next
a-
school year.
okay, because okay, so no retro.
I almost laughed when you said that Orange County is losing drivers to Budweiser, because we just lost our executive director of transportation to the county. Granted, not everybody smiles when they pull up, but we lost him because of pay, and some career advancement issues there as well. So as we approach this conversation, we need to keep in mind that we need good management in order to keep drivers in place. And I think the turnover in bus drivers has increased since we lost that executive director. And I mean, I've referred to him as the Tom Brady of public transportation for a reason. I mean, people wanted to work for him. He was phenomenal, and we lost him because we weren't paying him enough. The other piece, too, is parent complaints. Yes, I'm hearing the parent complaints. And when I lived in New York, I also heard the parent complaints. And they increased around the time of snow because, buses run late in the snow. Parent complaints here increase around the time of season because the traffic is worse and the buses run on a less reliable schedule when you have more people on the road. So there's the unique geographics of our region impact our busing as well. And I got to tell you, I would much rather, probably shouldn't say this because I don't want to encourage anybody to go away, but I think it requires a unique personality to drive a bus. You got as many as 77 children behind you. I have an entirely new appreciation for what our bus drivers do and the tremendous responsibility they have. I mean, I was a pretty good kid, but if I was going to misbehave, it was on the bus because the drivers can't see you, and kids are kids, and it's a tough job.
It's a split work schedule as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes it very, very difficult. And the way our routing is, the way that we've had to route because of this is we've got long routes. So it's, you're almost always bidding into something that's going to give you 8+, which throws you into an overtime situation. A lot of it, some of the factors that you mentioned. I mean, we're, at one point I was told, we're the 4th largest destination in the wintertime for people to move down and fill this. So that increases drive times, it increases overtime costs. We have a river that runs right down the middle of our county, which is a very a unique obstacle. And then we have more canals in Venice, Italy, which also makes routing very, very difficult to do. So we have, and not to mention the student assignment system that we have, and also the lack of infrastructure that we have. One of the challenges that we have in our school district is that we have a larger ridership than like a Miami-Dade or a Palm Beach. You know, Palm Beach, they can take one of those big 82-passenger buses, go into a neighborhood, and 3 stops, and they fill up the bus, and off they go. You know, where we are looking at some neighborhoods like Whiskey Creek and Tanglewood, I think you've got something like 14 or 15 different buses that have to go in there to get those kids to schools. We're working on that issue as well, but it also complicates this this matter. The ridership piece is, again, lack of public transportation, so we're hoping that our partner over there, Mr. Cody, helps us, because other school districts have great partnerships. Lee Tran right now is not poised to really help us to the degree we would like, but he hopes to expand that, and we hope to expand on that partnership so they can. But also, other ways to get kids to school. When you don't have sidewalks, you don't have bike paths and things like that, kids are less likely to be able to use those ways to travel. Lehigh is difficult. Cape Coral even is difficult, and there's other areas as well. But so anyway, it makes it very unique challenge for us, because we have to transport such a large percentage of our students, which makes recruiting bus drivers, and we're the 32nd largest school district, but I think it's the 22nd largest transportation department in the nation.
And I don't want anything I said to come across as I'm making excuses. I'm not making excuses. I'm just trying to understand the multiple layers there are to this problem that don't necessarily exist in other places.
And I think they do exist in, like they were saying, in other places. They just go different directions. And I do want to correct one thing. I have spoken to a few of the executives that have left, and it was, their statement to me is that it was not just salary as the reason that they left. That, in fact, one that I know for sure is taking less of a salary, not a lot, but less of a salary than they had here. And it was more of opportunity and I guess progression in their positions. So I just wanted to make sure that's on record as well. And
well, if I could say this too, one thing I think we have noticed is that we have had different conversations with these people, and different things have been said. And I think that the one individual, I would certainly agree that it was more about opportunity. I think in the salary over there, as he explained it to me, it was parallel when you talk about benefits. The executive pay increase got that individual to a point where it was slightly over, but the insurance was better, so he thought it was a wash. But the big thing was the multiple avenues that he could chase in terms of a career, moving forward, that he would not have had here. The next position over an executive is a chief position. A chief position is a very vulnerable position because it's working directly with the superintendent. And anytime you're working with if you have a superintendent change, then a lot of times a new superintendent comes in and wants, a new group of chiefs. So that doesn't appeal to everyone, and therefore, they want to. Many people want to have a career path that takes them away from that type of risk, particularly if they're, younger in their careers. And I can certainly, understand that. The other ones, again, I wouldn't say that it was the only factor, but compensation was greater in both of the other cases, but also career opportunity in the one case was even beyond. I mean, this person had an opportunity to go beyond even what a superintendent would make in this district. you know, if he were to pursue, you know, his ultimate goal. So that was very appealing. And then the other piece is life balance. A chief is expected to work a pretty heavy schedule, you know, be available weekends. They work, you know, well into, you know, evenings. For example, Dr. Pruitt has to do the negotiating, and, you know, that is something that, and also there's an expectation to attend community events and work long hours. You know, not everybody wants to do that stuff, particularly when you're raising a family. So, in fact, I don't know if I'd recommend it for someone who has, you know, young kids and a family. It's a very difficult job under those circumstances.
I just wanted to concur with what you said, because I actually spoke to all of them as well, and that was the same thing, that they had it was like an exit interview, but they had the opportunity to achieve more than where they're at right now. And they are younger, so they have a long way to go, and they just felt that that was a better place for them to be at this moment. It had nothing to do with the dislike of the district at all.
Anyone else? Other comments? I have one. It's kind of the comment that's come to me from several community leaders and community people, and it's the timing of the executive pay at the same time that we're having such an issue with the drivers. And I know that the executive pay increase that happened was in an event to try to stop the drain of executives leaving. And the comment that I was given is that if we don't reach market rate, we're going to lose more. The kind of balance south side to that is the bus drivers. And the statement that was made to me is that basically, and someone mentioned, like, which is more important at the time. Is it not more important to have the drivers to get the kids to school, to raise their rates before we would raise the executives? Not saying that we don't have to get the executives up to market rate, but it's the timing of it. If we had given even some percentage to the drivers and to the teachers at the time, I don't think the executive pay issue would have looked as lack of a word, better, than it does. So that's the question basically that's on the table. Did we value one part of our employees more than we valued the bus drivers and the teachers?
One thing I would say, you know, one thing that Dr. Pruitt had mentioned is that this is something we have we've continued to work on. You know, this is, for the last 3 years, we have given a percentage increase to our employees that is greater than the percentage increase that has gone to this school district from the state. In other words, we have, I think the average is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3% compensation for, you know, teachers and support staff over the last 3 years, whereas the state has provided us anywhere from the neighborhood of, I think, 1.3% to less. And the way we've done that is continuing to look at our budget and becoming more and more efficient. And this most recent contract is taking that even one step further. We as a school district, you know, I think for the very first time are really digging in and budgeting strategically in an effort to try to get our teachers up to the 75th percentile. We're not going to do that waiting on money from the state of Florida. We're just simply not. And so we recognize that, understand that we're going to have to do our budget differently, and we started early this year for that purpose. We also decided this year, because we only had gotten that 47 cent increase this year, we couldn't just simply tell our employee groups, hey, that's all we got, you know, here you go, it's the state's fault. We're not doing that. We decided we're going to dig in and make this a multi-year commitment to our employees. But in order to get them more than that 47 cent, we're going to have to dig in and readjust this year's budget and next year's budget to get those dollars. This is a large commitment to try to get there despite the trend that we're getting from the state. You know, so again, last 3 years of increases of 3% versus the state, new state money, you know, 1.3%, I believe is the number, or less. And you know, so to say, I mean, I understand, believe me, I understand in terms of the timing issue, but from our perspective, you know, this is something that we are continuing to work on. And with the executive pay, we honestly, it was put off a year because it was a part of the FY18 budget as well. You know, so we contemplated, you know, pulling the trigger then. We opted to do it in 19, which saved the district some money overall, which can be put back in the general fund. But you know, here we are. I don't know if there's a good time to do this. But like I said, I understand what you're saying. I think in the context, this is a long-range project, not just a one and done.
Well, in timeline, and let me just explain, I did a little research into it. In 2016 and 17, at the end of the budget, the board and the district decided, and there's a statement that said that no admin would be paid any increases before talc and SPAC was approved by the board. And then in 2017-18, the board approved in March a 2.5% increase for admin across the board. So when you look at the list, some of the people that got this increase in December also got a 2.5 that was retroactive to July 17. And they got that in 18. So they've technically gotten 2 increases this year. When you look through and we talk about market rate, I couldn't find anywhere that the board actually approved market rate. It was a part of discussion, but it wasn't like we will vote on using this, so I didn't see that.
It's when they approved the administrator salary schedule, that's when it's approved.
Okay.
And I don't know the exact date when that happened, but when the administrator salary schedule is approved, that's where the market rate was approved.
Well, on the other ones in March, it said 2.5 and the 13% and all of that. But there was nothing, I guess there was no detail on the market as far as numbers. Then in 2019, the executive market raises, my question is why weren't they approved by the new board? Because it had been passed by the board in March, which would have been the last year's budget.
Mm-hmm.
The new budget started and we came on, but we were not, this didn't happen before that decision. So
Right.
we didn't get to vote on that. And I hate to bring up the elephant in the room, but I was told that, and when I asked the question, where will we get the money to pay for this market increase? And I was told specifically 22 million. There was a budget of 22 million that was found. And I've asked on a couple of occasions for a list showing it's this amount, this amount, this amount that equals 22 million. Mm-hmm. And that has not surfaced. So you can understand the question.
Mm-hmm. So the only thing I can say relative to the first part of what you said, the market rate for the executives was supposed to occur in after talc, spalk, and N last year, but the decision was made to put it on.
And where is that decision and who made it?
That was through the administrator salary schedule when that was approved. I mean, that's the authority for that. I don't know what other
March
word.
27th. I'm not sure the exact
It
date. I
is.
have to look it up and see.
If anyone wants to look on
Right.
the computer, it's the
Right.
March 27th meeting.
And so we haven't, the salary schedules haven't come back for the new board's approval because they happen after we reach the tentative agreements and everything is approved. So you'll get all of those just like they did for FY18. You approved them in March. So remember, the year was almost over. The same is going to happen As soon as we reach the agreements and they're drafted, then they'll come for board approval. That's kind of the process of how it unfolds.
And I get that. Although something that was passed in March and something that's done on our watch, to our public and the people in the community, it seems like we approved something because it happened on our watch and we really didn't know about that. Yes.
Oh, it seems to me that there are really three questions on the table here. First of all is the philosophy. We as a former board agreed that we were going to follow a process over a 5-year period to increase salaries at every level. So I think the question for this new board is, do we still support that? Because essentially what's happening here is a challenge to the process that was put in place for a decision that was made by the previous board. The second thing that we need to talk about is the process. We have gone from a fixed rate compensation to a market rate compensation, and the board has not reviewed the protocol to be used for that, and therefore there may be questions that need to be answered with respect to that process. And then the third thing is a policy, because essentially we've moved away from an administrator pay schedule for a particular group of employees, and we probably need to have in policy what the board expectations are with respect to that separate group. So those to me are the three things that we really need to accomplish in the workshop today.
I mean, because right here in the salary schedule, it says the salary range for executive positions will be determined by the district market rate, which is based on data from the Economic Research Institute and comparable Florida public school districts. And then you can read the rest of it, but that's in the board-approved salary schedule.
In March.
Yes, it's the current one.
Right. So my question is, it was approved by the, and put in the budget for in March 27th. Because I only found out about this like after the fact. I was not privy and on the list of being told. So I actually asked Dr. Atkins on last Monday we spoke, and I was told it was $300,000, and I don't know where 22 million came from, but I was told $300,000 and it was budgeted. So it was budgeted.
22 is for the all employees.
It's for the market raises
Okay.
across the board.
Yeah, well, that number never came up to me, so I'm not aware of that. So my question really is, from everything I read about it, the expenditure, when did we vote on the actual expenditure of the executive salaries?
We didn't.
It's part of the budget.
Yeah.
But a part of which budget, which year?
But
Our policy.
right, but there was no
July
amount. It's just
19
it was
budget.
just as M for market rate. There's no amount. Why would we just carte blanche that? I don't understand.
That's why I'm saying that we need to
Okay.
perhaps have in policy, because the
Okay.
board has given the superintendent that authority. Essentially, there is nothing in writing that says we will do this, we will approve these. And that's why I'm saying we need to have a conversation about whether or not we want to change
Yes.
that.
Because, I mean, I just don't think that the last paycheck of the year should have rolled out like that without the board approving that, that expenditure.
It
Right.
was already
It was already approved.
Right. And
Okay,
budget.
Mary, I think you had your hand up.
So I think a lot of the scuttlebutt occurred because that executive raise appeared on the 21st of December in people's paychecks, people saying they were not aware of it. And I think I asked this question the last time. Help me understand what I missed, because I was not aware that incident was going to happen then. I was aware of the plan that we approved in March. I knew the money was budgeted. But as far as not paying that out when the others were paid and doing it, it seemed like it was last minute. So people, I think, in the schools and in the community were like, what's that about? Did no one, and then they do call us and say, what did you guys do? And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, how could you not? So I think that if I were looking for some kind of an explanation, it would be like, how did that really happen? So that it was almost like a surprise thing. And most people say they were not aware of it.
Even the employees that received them
Exactly.
didn't know they were
Exactly.
getting that, so.
Exactly, so
You know,
I
it's
think that
Merry
was
Christmas.
where the issue lies around this, because we already know that the money was was approved, that the process was approved, and the money was budgeted
Where though?
in March.
In March.
No, I'm
March
saying
18.
the budget, what I had asked to see is, where is that 300, here's where I got confused.
Right, and that was.
The budget, I was told for the market increases was the 22 million. And the thing is, so the 300,000 should have come out of what was budgeted for the market increases.
Right.
Okay, so where is, it's like in accounting, you take something out of this bucket, and you put it over here, this is a minus, this is a plus, but it crosses, and everybody knows where every dollar is at every time.
And that was another question I had, where was that amount specified?
Where was exactly?
In the 17-18 budget or the 2018-19 budget. That's,
In any budget.
well,
No,
Can I have our CFO come address the budget part of this?
Hey, everybody.
Pull up a chair.
Yeah, so it was approved and budgeted, and it didn't go forward last fiscal year when it was approved in March. So though that amount of monies that, as it was talked here, did not go forward, that is carryover dollars that we budgeted for this year to go forward. And then the discussion of the timing and everything else, but general fund dollars, as we budget for, as we go in and what we're getting from the state and what can we potentially do for compensation and salaries and working with compensation on, as we get into negotiating and everything. So those monies that was approved in March, general fund dollars, salaries, compensation for all employees, that's one small part of the overall big salaries compensation budget for the district.
I think she's asking, is there a line item? And the answer
Yeah,
is no,
where-
it's all in one
It's
big pot.
salaries and benefits. Correct.
So there's nothing that exists that says we're taking this 300,000 from here and putting it here on December 21st. For example, what order went from HR to payroll to make that happen?
Well, again, when he does the budget, and I don't, I'll try to put it in layman's terms as best I can. They have to look at the positions that we have as a school district and what they believe they're going to be paying those positions for FY19. And then they use that to build the overall budget. So, for example, in this case, if FY18, they had budgeted for these positions to be at that rate, and those dollars were not expended that particular year, so they were rolled into the FY19 budget, which is very typical. That's what happens. The other thing they have to plan for is what's called lapse. So if you don't fill a position for a period of time, they'll fund a position for the whole year. But if the position is vacant for a part of the year, that's called lapse factor. So those are dollars that they have to plan for. So whenever they're doing salaries, when they move forward, like with this particular one, knowing what the market rate was going to be, they're going to plan their salary portion of the budget based on what they expect to be paying for that fiscal year. So it's not like this little item like this, it's the whole big thing of all salaries and benefits across the district that they're planning for. The other piece that you want to keep in mind is that we are trying to look at the percentage of our general fund budget that we expend on salaries and benefits, and we're actually trying to increase that percentage as we try to increase the amount of compensation we give for our employees. And I think that one of the things we do is we do look at other districts and what is the percentage that you provide. We're very close. We're in the kind of in the average, but as we strive to get to the 75th percentile with teachers, and then increase it with other groups, we want to be above average. In other words, get to a point where we're using a larger percentage of our budget for salaries and benefits and less for other things.
So this is why I'm confused. In the budget book on page 123, it says administrative salary schedule is organized by pay grade and step as well, except for chiefs and executive directors, which are based by market rates. The salary schedule holds the daily rate of pay for each pay grade and step. Administrator salary increases are determined after all other salary schedules are negotiated and approved by the board. So we're still, Spout just got approved, and we're still negotiating with Tout, so that's where that's how I'm so confused, I think.
It was really supposed to occur after, it was supposed to happen,
Last year,
it's
after.
last year after Tout, Spout, and N is when it was supposed to happen.
Right, but I'm looking at the 19 budget book, so this was, do you see?
Right, but the money is for last year is when it was approved and supposed to be executed, after the other employee groups.
So that schedule was approved, and the analysis and the market analysis, market pay analysis for administrators and executive pay schedule, all that analysis was provided and done and approved in the schedule last year. So with that amount of money, what the increases in the salaries, that was the amount that was budgeted, did not go forward. And so that's still, that amount, that schedule is still, it's there, it's what's been approved, and so that amount of monies now is carried over to this year to be implemented this year. And then as far as the implementation and timing of it, that's what happened on December 21st.
Okay, well, so then I guess that's my question. I think that we should have given the raises, I think we should have been asked and had a conversation, because my opinion would have been, let's give it to the teachers and the bus drivers first before executives.
But it had already been approved. They got it.
This is
Yeah.
2 different years.
Yeah.
That's what's confusing, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on one second. Kathleen, you had a
No.
comment? Oh, okay.
So then what's the easy, straightforward answer to, how did this happen on December 21st without any discussion and a lack of awareness among a lot of people? So I think that's, I understand all the other stuff, and I'm aware of the carryover and all that. So it didn't happen when it could have happened.
And my question
fiscal year.
is
I guess that's
kind of
why.
what Kathleen had said a few moments ago, that our purpose could be here today to come up with the policy to see what could happen. The bridge between that is something happened and we didn't have the policy to handle it. It wasn't handled under policy.
Right, but it was
that's
handled
the
under
issue.
the existing process that was already approved and agreed to. I think it was
But
just
wasn't it agreed to do it that year?
Yes, but then when it didn't happen, it was carried over. So the
that's-
money, we know the money was there. I think it was just the way it was delivered.
The
I mean,
communication.
is that a fair, yeah, I mean, the
I would say
communication piece
the
is.
communication, I think,
Yeah.
is a fair criticism, because I will tell you my perspective, which is going to be different than your perspectives. Okay, what I've noticed in this is everybody does have a different perspective on this, and I'm not going to say anybody's a right or wrong. I'll give you what mine is. When we did this in March, we discussed strategy when the board wanted to implement certain things. And one of the things that the board wanted to do was they wanted to work on superintendent pay first, and this is going to be something that they wanted to take on after. So that's what we did. It was budgeted and a part of this budget and to be implemented this year. That was the agreement that I felt we were moving forward with, and that's what I executed. What I did do in anticipation that this issue would come up is I asked Dr. Pruitt to put together this, which some of you have seen. Most of you have seen this. And then I talked it over what our strategy would be. And I even said, with this one, I'm doing this now. And I had her in the meeting with me to try to make sure I was clear that we're doing this now, pointing to the executive portion of this graph. We're in negotiations here, we're in negotiations here. Now, if I had it to do over again, and we've talked about this, I would say it's going to be on this paycheck, and here are the amounts specifically.
Now, I will tell you honestly, I've never done that, and I've never seen other superintendents do that. But in the future, that's what I'm more than happy to do. So that's, again, my perspective. You know, Mrs. Giovanelli and I had a conversation. We did not meet, and therefore she did not see this. This has since been updated, which is what I would prefer people use, because the ones that are updated are more accurate, and that's what, you know, that they look like that.
Well, when I had my conversation,
I have one on that.
and when that was brought up, and my question was, it was kind of across the board, here's the market, you know, information. And the first question I asked was, and we are going to do teachers and support staff first. And the answer was, we're still in negotiation. Okay, so I honestly do not recall you saying to me, we're going to do executives first. Because I know for a fact I would not have
Different years.
just,
I understand. Yeah, I've heard that. We've had the conversation. We really felt we executed the conversation the same 6 times.
And, you know,
I do feel like we, you know, hindsight, more detail and specifics
right.
would have been helpful to the conversation.
well, and the other part is the fact that this same group did get a 2.5% increase in March, was it? And the administrators at the schools got the 2.5% increase. And the rest of the staff, the teachers and all, like, well, yours is coming.
They got
but-
the 2.5 because the decision was made not to go forward with the market rate. And so at least that 2.5 was gonna get them a little bit closer to the market rate, but that was the philosophy behind it, because the market rate wasn't gonna be implemented, at least the 2.5 would get it a little closer.
So where do we go from here? Yes, Kathleen?
I'd like to ask another question, because I don't recall discussing this with the previous board in the session when we talked about executive pay, and that was the inclusion of compensation for degrees and ad comp. It never occurred to me that with the going to market rate, we would also include other things that we had built into the administrative schedule to try to make those salaries. So I am concerned about the fact that
And that, to not pay the degrees would have been in violation of the current salary schedule. So I think the conversation needs to be had, what does it need to say moving forward? The same is true with the performance pay piece, because that is a piece of compensation that has moved with the employees throughout the years. So I think that's the question that need to be answered when we represent that. What does it need to look like? And if we say market rate, does it include or not include these things? It's one of those, the first time that you're doing something, it's kind of the devil in the details there. And so I think that needs to be addressed when we bring forward the new salary schedule.
are we talking about, as a board, are we talking about creating a separate salary schedule for market rate compensated employees?
Let me interject this. The goal is to get all administrators there. So I don't know if it needs to be necessarily separate or if it needs to be spelled out different, if maybe that's what you're saying. But the goal is long-term that everybody
All right.
is market rate. That's the long-term goal.
So then what we need is to describe that in protocol and in policy, so that as everybody migrates, we have an opportunity to.
Well, that it's in black and white, and everyone can
Yeah.
read it and understand it.
Well, I think that's just transparent.
Right.
That's all it needs to be, for me.
Yes, Chris.
I feel like we're beating a dead horse here. I feel like there has been a plea or a statement by the board that there was some misunderstanding surrounding this. I think that, you know, as we come together as a team and we struggle to do that, we also have to give administration some time to understand the needs of this new team in terms of communication. I can tell you that as From my position, I understood what was happening. Everyone in this room has heard me tell the story that one of my very first conversations with the superintendent was regarding his pay. He, in my estimation, and based on my professional experience before joining this board, was grossly underpaid. And he refused to even have that conversation with me until we had addressed teacher pay and gotten teacher pay up to the 55th percentile. There's some feeling here or some discussion here that teachers came after executives. Executives were last. You know, I remember being in conversations with chiefs and saying, please, we're getting to you. I promise you we're getting to you, but we've got to get our teachers up there first. It is incumbent upon me as a board member to ask questions until I understand. It is also incumbent upon me as a board member to meet with the superintendent regularly. That is transparency. Meeting regularly with the superintendent, not refusing to meet with the superintendent, not asking to get information through the board attorney, but actually meeting face to face and asking the hard questions. And the other thing that I've heard here is perception, scuttlebutt, criticism. I knew when I gave the superintendent a raise that I was going to face criticism in the community. I was fully aware of that. That being said, he's still underpaid. You know, I sought what I thought was a sort of a happy medium. What do I need to pay him to keep him, and what can the community accept? He should be being paid more than what he's being paid right now. Talk about salary compression. You know, I have some concerns about where chiefs are as compared to where the superintendent is, and where chiefs can go as compared to where the superintendent can go. I mean, these are, you know, when I ran for this office, I knew there would be criticism, but I frankly, I'm not concerned about the criticism because I believe we did the right thing. The former board, now, you know, there's questions. I get that there are questions, but this is a decision that was made by the prior board, and I'm not clear on why we're continuing to beat that dead horse. I think we need to take steps to make this work for the future with this current board, in accordance with the suggestions that Ms. Morgan has made. And I will finally say, Ms. Gittens, I've heard you characterize the $22 million of found money, as you say, at a couple, listen, could you, I know, can you let me finish? Because the same thing was said to me in meetings with the superintendent. And the characterization of $22 million in found money makes it sound like the money was somehow lost, or the money was just sitting there not being used, or, and you know, a conversation with the superintendent in his office is going to be different from an explanation to the public in a public meeting. And when he said to me, we found $22 million, I knew that that was as a result of incredibly hard work by staff to find that money and to make cuts. And I also know that when the chiefs meet, they're going at it with each other. And, you know, they need money for their departments, and they're going to fight hard for that money, but they need to justify that it's somehow tied to the strategic goal. So finding the money meant cutting from someplace else. Finding the money meant very, very difficult value judgments by the superintendent and his team to determine where do we need to give up in order to get to where we want to go. So I feel like I needed to say that in the past two meetings, I've heard that characterization, and it's kind of felt like a punch in the gut, because I've seen the budgeting work done by this staff over the past couple of years. Just my impression. I'm not throwing an arrow at you. Just,
I'm not taking it.
Okay, good.
I'm not taking it. Let me just answer that, and then Mary and then Betsy. That could have been resolved by just showing us numbers. Okay. And I'm not trying to throw daggers and saying found. I'm saying just show us where it was.
I understand, and maybe that's part of the larger conversation that I requested in an email to you and Dr. Atkins regarding how does this board define transparency, right? And that's a larger discussion that we need to have, and I think that conflicts and issues like this will be resolved as staff understands what we mean by transparency, right?
I totally agree. It's swimming around in my head, so I'm going to say it. Just show me the money.
Yeah.
to show us the paper that says we took this from here and this from here, then it's easy to counteract all of the things that are being said and thought. And I'm sorry for disrupting before Mary and then Betsy, please.
No, that's okay. So I'm just going to back up a little bit. You know, I think that we talked on Thursday a little bit about the necessity for us to come together and work as a team to include the people who were not here when some of the decisions were made, but those decisions still stand. So then I think that, yes, we expect criticism and we hear both. I mean, I had a call the other day that said, my bus driver is the most fantastic person. He knows my kid, he gets him on time, I mean, and looks out for him. So there's, you know, there are always some compliments as well as criticisms. But I think that in this situation, and I'm just going to speak for myself, I had a lack of awareness. So I was unable to answer questions because maybe you were aware of that, but I wasn't. And then something was just said that put another question in my head, and that is, so if after the March of 18 approval, if everyone got their percentage raises, including executives, because my understanding when I asked the question later in December was that executives had not gotten anything, that was what was carried forward and that's what they were getting now. But now you're saying there was a percentage rate raise and then they got the market rate raise. So then, so that tells me a whole different story. Now I am confused.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like there should be a simple, straightforward answer to help us all to understand the same thing at the same time, because that's the information that we need to be able to function as a governance team.
And that, I think, brings us back to Kathleen's 3 items.
Yes.
How do we solve this problem in a systematic way going forward?
So we can't change it, any of it. We're going to go forward, and we need a plan to do that. We agree on that. But I still feel like I would like to have like a clear-cut, definite answer about what exactly transpired.
Yeah, really 2 things. This is why I really like the workshop setting, because then we can ask our questions and hopefully we will feel comfortable enough to ask questions that may to some people who have more information or more experience seem silly, but they're things that we need to feel comfortable to ask those without incurring the other members perhaps feeling that the questions are silly. Secondly, I'm glad Dr. Atkins mentioned the communication, and he said last week that it's something to be worked on, because I see that as a huge issue. And in those individual meetings, often, because I know I ask a lot of questions in those meetings, we go on a tangent. So it's not surprising to me that we had different levels of yeah, it was shown to us, okay. Finally, the question that I was curious about is how, and this is just for information for me, I see 2 years ago in the 16-17 budget, it talked about administrative salary, pay grade, and step. And then in 18-19, it said that it's pay grade and steps for administrators except for the chiefs and executive directors. So really 2 things. I'm just curious how it came to be, and this is just, I need history here, how it came to be that we went to the market rate. And secondly, when we think about salaries, and this I know is really big in industry, it's really, especially for the executive levels, compensation packages. And I know there was some special things put in Dr. Adkins' contract. My question is then how we came to that in the past 2 years. And secondly, is there a component, an additional compensation packet You know, having been a teacher, I know exactly, you know, Florida retirement system. Is there something special or extra that comes in for the chiefs and executives?
So let me answer the first part. The salary schedule M came about due to the fact that we were struggling to hire executives and chiefs.
Okay.
And we would make a job offer, and then they would find out what the pay was, and then they would turn down the position. The one that really comes to mind is we were looking at an executive director for government and community relations, and the pay was, I think, going to be about 120-something thousand, and she said no because she got offered a raise at her current job to make $189,000. So that's but there were a couple examples like that. When we were working with contacting search firms to help us with chief operating, chief academic, chief information, some of the search firms wouldn't work with us because they said the salary was too low. Well, there was no ability, it was step and grade, that's all there was. So M was an attempt to allow us to be more competitive with the salaries within certain parameters, and so that's why it came about, due to the need.
In HR and superintendent?
Yeah, the
Okay,
superintendent said, give me a solution, we need to be more competitive, and so
Okay,
we went
okay.
out and said, okay, what is done out there, how do you address that, and it was through that piece.
Okay.
In addition to your second question, there's no other incentives or packages for chiefs or executives, just the
Same.
market rate pay.
The same retirement package and,
Now,
Yes.
other districts do offer a higher multiplier for their executives. We do.
that's what I'd heard.
Right, we do not here.
Okay.
Okay, for sake of time, I am going to suggest, and Cindy, I'm gonna put you on the spot if you are available. We have discussed the need to draft a board policy, and you're the policy girl. So perhaps you could join us up here at the board. Is that fine with everyone? And as other questions come out, then we can address them. Are we all in agreement to do that, to move forward? Okay. Would you come up?
While she's coming up, may I say one thing? Just from a morale perspective, you know, I think it's hard for executive directors and chiefs to hear their salaries being questioned. I want you guys to understand how deserving I think you are. You know, Dr. Pruitt put together sort of a history of where we were in terms of searches and who's working for the district and who was hired and why they were hired. And I have to tell you guys, this would have been part of my report this afternoon, but I'll tell you now. At the end of our Finance Advisory Committee meeting last week, one of the members made a motion to sign Trey Davis to a lifelong contract. I'm not making that up. That's the kind of talent we're talking about there. While there was some indication that Greg Blurton would grow into the role, I believe that he stepped foot into that job day one and brought new ideas, including, you know, long-term forecasting for our budget, and he has made some important changes immediately there. Dr. Creel, I see you as a change agent in academic services. You're working in an environment that's incredibly difficult to make change, and I believe that you're working under research-based proven strategies to move our students forward. And it's difficult for us at times to implement change given the amount of sort of pushback that we can get sometimes. Who am I missing? Angela, well, I mean, you're a proven entity. Like there was no new there for me. You were a proven entity. I've known you across the board for a long time. And then our executive directors, you know, I feel like their work needs to be appreciated, and I feel like sometimes when we have difficult conversations like this, that might get lost in the conversation, and, you know, they work their butts off. And Susan Millay talked about best practices at the workshop last week. Best practices aren't, you know, close your eyes and throw a dart at a board. Best practices are learned by engaging with other professionals across the state and across the nation. and truly investing their lives in this work. You know, these are people who have devoted their professional lives to this district, and there is a piece of them that are public servants because they're never going to make what they could make in private industry. So a piece of them, they are public servants, but they're also professionals. They're professionals who operate at a very high level, and I feel like, you know, I can't pay you what you're worth, but I want you to hear my appreciation.
And I just will add to that, and maybe it's an agree to disagree, I in no way, shape, or form personally am saying disregarding any of the work that's done. I do believe that all of the executives and everyone works very hard. I think where the agree to disagree is the perception of the fact that we need that teacher level, that support level, and like I mentioned to the superintendent, without that level, we don't even have the need for the people that are above them. If we don't fill the teacher spots to teach the children, and it goes back to that teacher heart that I keep bringing up. But when that door closes, that bell rings, and you've got those, you know, kids looking at you to teach them something, or you are responsible for transporting them back and forth. That is a very, very important and integral part. No one is more important than the other, but it's the perception of how we do things when we do things.
I understand, but I don't want to leave with the impression that, you know, teachers are our lifeblood. Teachers are where we focus first and where we continue. Our goal is to get teachers to the 75th percentile, you know, the highest group in the market, and that is a goal that we've put forward. Teachers are what gets you the results in the classroom. I think we all are in agreement. I understand the perception and the timing. I get it, but I don't want to leave some folks with the impression that we don't, because we do. We don't get anywhere without teachers. And then the other valuable one that we haven't talked about is we have to value our principals, because that's what keeps teachers working in buildings, as you know. And you know, it really, that's the person who sets the positive culture in the building. Without that, you're not going to, that's a big part of a retention problem for a district if you don't have high quality principals in our schools.
Lisa has her hand up. So is it fair to say that let me back up. So I think it's fair that I believe the executive pay. Was never my question. I think it's fair to say that everyone would like to know when it's going to happen. We didn't know when it was going to happen. They didn't even know when it was going to happen. So I think that, to me, is we need that schedule. Back to you. I agree. So SPALC has been ratified. TALC has not.
It's not been ratified.
Oh.
Tentative agreement.
Tentative. Okay. So.
They have to vote on it, and then if they're successful, then you have to vote on it.
So they will get that money August 1st, I'm told. You're saying August 1st or August? So what?
It's effective.
Group of employees.
So that's my whole point. They're not going to see it until the next contract. That's my question, really.
They could have seen it in July, but they didn't see it until December. In fact, they could have seen it the year before, but they didn't see it until December of the next year.
And that's subject for negotiations. So
Yeah,
one of the things that when you're negotiating a multi-year contract, one of the things that you have to negotiate is the timing of the payout. There's a couple choices that the team could have made here. It could have gone forward with a small package this year, retro back to July of FY19. That was a choice that they had at the bargaining table.
It's all negotiated.
Yeah, it's all negotiated.
We agreed, so it's not as if we're imposing that on them.
And the team, I don't want to put words in the team's mouth, but you know, some years, like one year when I was negotiating a contract with teachers and I was negotiating a contract with support staff, the teachers wanted 1%, you know, retro back to July 1. The support union
said, we want 2%, and we do not want retro pay. Now, ultimately, that's a little bit better of a deal, but what we agreed to it at the time and made sure we also communicated with teachers about this deal is that, you know, the teachers had gotten a little bit further in the market than the support staff, so all agreed that that was probably a fair way to do it. But so what happened was teachers that year received retro, and support staff that year did not receive retro. And so this particular year, because we had gotten such a small increase from the state, we felt that we would work on our budget to try to give more of an increase to our employees over a 2-year period of time rather than a 1-year period of time. And then how that plays out, whether it's retro or not retro, how much is paid this year versus next year, is a subject to the bargaining process. So that's how that agreement was made. That wasn't my decision to say, let's not pay them until 19. That's a decision that they make at the bargaining table based on the dollars that they have available.
Part of the consideration was the putting the money towards insurance and benefits effective April 1st. So that was part of the consideration.
Okay, I just want to make sure that they're taken care of. I guess that's where I'm going, and so
Right.
and I'm with Ms. Gittens. I mean, now, not tomorrow.
Right.
That's all.
You had a comment, I'm sorry.
Some of the information we've had discussions with TALC because we put an option out before the break, and so they've heard some of this historic information, but we have increased the percentage of teachers at the state average in terms of salary per years of experience from about 20% in FY16 to it's now above 40%. And rough estimate is that more than half of teachers at the end of this round of negotiations will be above the state average, based on the 2-year deal that we're currently discussing. And some of that has been because we've done that targeted market increase and focused on, rather than, you know, a flat % across the board, focusing on those areas where people have called and had those concerns or complaints and say, you know, I feel like I've been passed over, and taken that information back, looked at the data, and then focused the increase on.
And now, I've heard that the teachers are up. I've heard 3 different things. I've heard 55, I've heard 60, I've heard 40. And you don't have to answer it right now, but that's kind of
They're at 55th percentile today.
Right.
Our goal is to try to get them to the 75th
Oh,
percentile.
so taking them up by 40.
Up to 75th percentile. They're at the 55th percentile today.
Okay, all right.
I had one, it's really quick. Once all of this is done, is it possible to make available to us, kind of pulling out where our newbie teachers are in the first couple years, mid-level? And I know it's all negotiated by TALC, I understand that.
I'm going to show you a little bit this morning.
But,
I'll show you some.
okay. I'm just curious because I know that has been a huge teacher, not only complaint, but that's a morale buster. That's a big one for the mid and, okay, so you'll be able to break out.
Yeah, I'll show you what we have, and then if you
Oh,
want
okay.
more, then
Oh,
we'll-
okay. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Do you want to take about 5 to do that?
No, that
Or-
would be for, that's an
Executive
That's
session.
in
Oh, okay,
executive,
okay.
all right.
Yeah.
So, Cindy,
Yay.
do you want to come up and let's kind of put this together?
And while Cindy is coming up, a couple things. One, the budget, that's something that we can get to you either, you know, one-on-one, or we may be doing a little bit in executive session on the budget in terms of the dollars and where they are. And then as we're moving forward in the budget process, we'll continue to share that information with the board. The second thing that Ms. Fisher brought up was just, and I've heard some of the other ones, what happened when? So we'll try to stretch that out. You know, approximate, you had a approval of administrative salary schedule in March. A strategy in terms of when you wanted to do pay was superintendent salary first, executive pay second. Then you had the approval of the tentative budget in that June, July timeframe, and then the final budget that was approved in September. And then you had the execution of executive pay
November that actually came into play in the December paycheck. So that's,
I have a comment, Ms. Giddens.
Yes.
I don't think we should be doing the work of staff. I think that staff has heard what our concerns are. I think that our expectation as a board would be that HR and the superintendent would come forward with a process based on what they've heard and make a recommendation to us for conversation. Because for us to sit here as 7 and micromanage something that really is a departmental responsibility, I think is asking a lot.
Well, I was going on the draft of board policy part that's on the agenda. That's
Well, Rob
why
can
I
do
was
that.
on.
I
Okay.
can work with them.
Yeah.
I would just state that you already have an administrative salary schedule,
Mhm.
so I'm more than likely would recommend that this, the tools, the process that Ms. Morgan mentioned in her email be added to that. But I certainly have to work with the experts in that.
And then
area
two
to
things
do
that
that.
I would like to make sure is in
Sure.
there is the communication piece. How does that look? How does that flow? And kind of back to what Chris was saying before, what is transparency? And then the other statement that Betsy had mentioned before, that's at the end of a couple of the budgets that says the administrative salary schedule, et cetera. And it does say administrator salary increases are determined after all other salary schedules are negotiated and approved.
That's in the budget, correct?
Right. So, but I'm just saying some of that verbiage so that we're clear next time. Yes.
I just want to say one thing, and if this had just been done last year, we would not even be sitting here having this conversation.
Right.
But they chose to hold it off. So we know that that was something that was done. And as far as the ERI, we all can go on there. I went on there myself, as well as other different organizations that do that for the market rate to see where we were, and we were definitely in line with that. And we could actually have been more depending upon what we chose to put in that.
Well, because, the executives and the chiefs are still at the lowest. It's at the 32nd percentile versus all other employee groups are higher than that, keeping in line with where the importance in terms of teachers being the highest.
And I know that we all believe that every single person who works here in the district is valuable. Because without all of them, we will be nothing. So, I think everybody's
Correct.
on that same line. I just had to say that.
Since you have, I know you're recruiting right now for some of the positions that are open, and with the increase, have you seen any difference in ability to attract?
Anecdotally, yes, because the ads, most of them started previous, we've been putting negotiable, and so we've been having conversations with people, and we've had some of the most robust pools that we've ever had relative to chiefs and executive directors. I can't tell you how it translates yet, because we haven't done the interviews, but in terms of the initial pools, they're definitely more robust.
and I will, just to give you another example that I've shared with some of you, but the chief academic officer is an example of one where we have gone out literally 3 times in an attempt to get a chief academic officer. When Dr. Burke was here, that's when the first one came. That did not work out, but I remember being on that interview team. The pool was not a very rich pool, so to speak, and actually the top candidate, and this is nothing against the top candidate, but the top candidate really did not have academic experience beyond what you would find in a principal's position, which we felt a district this size, that's not good enough. We went out, after that change was made in that position, we went out a second time as a part of that team. Again, the team reached a conclusion that we did not have a viable candidate. What we saw were a lot of people who were retired from small districts up north and superintendencies and things like that came and applied for maybe a retirement job, that type of thing. And so we ended up as a team not selecting a candidate. Soretta Ralph stepped into that position. And then we went out a third time. We again were not able to attract viable candidates, and so we had to enlist a search firm.
And and we were able and fortunate to get Dr. Creel. But Dr. Creel, you know, it was you know, a very unique set of circumstances, and also the strategic plan, Vision 2020, was also something of an appeal to her, so she decided to join our team. So, you know, operations, same type of thing. It's been very difficult, but I am encouraged with what I see, you know, what I see in terms of folks that have applied this time.
May I say that under our previous salaries, I suspect that we were maybe attracting other districts' problems as well. People who had either been pushed out of other districts because of lack of performance, or, you understand what I'm saying? We obviously weren't getting the cream of the crop. And we've been lucky, again, that we've been able to get some that we had.
Continued with other information in the executive session. Any other comments before we conclude that? Okay. The silence tells me we are done with this, and thank you so much for your information.